I've opened several pieces to give you a reference point to start the jacket. I opened them in case you can't find them or you need new ones. I was in File, Open, Zero Share, and I opened Basic Size 8 Form 13, and I also opened my jacket from my flash drive or my C drive. If you happen to bring these in to use them, for instance, all of the ones that I'm highlighting right now, if you look down here on the lower row, if they don't have your name on them, make sure that you save them with your name on before you do anything to that. And I'll do that on these two because I'm going to work with them a little bit, but you may already have copies of these with your name on. So these are the original 4 that I draped a basic pattern for. These 2 were taken from it, and the jacket that we've been working on are these 4 pieces. So I'm going to stack them so you can see how they relate. I'm not going to do it perfectly, but you can see that the skirt and bodice come together just the way the sheath dress does. But when they're separated, they have a bit of a horizontal dart here that's missing. And I set the skirt up so that it can be used in 2 different ways. One that matches so you can turn it into a princess line, and one that looks better as a skirt that has 2 separate darts in it. So that's marked on there and you can use it either way, but if you're using this single dart, you have to get rid of the 2 other darts that add up to that. So one way or the other. And then our jacket that we started from the blouse, which is created from the sheath dress. And the reason I'm pointing out the sheath dress is if you want to make a long coat instead of a shorter one, you have this additional information down here. So I'm just lining them up where they go. And if you were to decide you wanted to make a longer jacket that I'm working on, than I'm demonstrating, then you would line them up carefully and make sure that your hip area comes out to here. So you'd want to add another 2, 3, 4, 5. If you added 5 inches to the length using this pattern and that curve shape, then you would just be able to lengthen it as much as you want straight down, but you would need to include this curve with the upper half if you wanted it to look nice. So if I really wanted to do that, probably the simplest way would be to carefully line them up the way that they go and copy this line onto this piece, and then the rest of it would just be straight lines. Okay, so that's how our jacket pieces relate to our original basic. If you want to make your jacket a slightly different size than the one that I'm working on, you're welcome to do that. If you're going to be making it as a manufactured sort of thing, then you'd want to just go ahead and grade the jacket up and use the grading part of the computer to do that. If you're wanting to change it into more of a couture effect and something that would fit you, if you want to just make the little jacket, then you can skip this part, but if you're interested in changing the size, then I'm going to show you how to change the size on the large one, maybe how that relates to just the jacket pieces that I've got in this separate window. So I will go back and simplify with this one. I would probably make my size changes on the larger overall piece than just the jacket if I were wanting to fit myself or someone else. And to do that, I'm going to show you how to add to the side seam on the other one because we're going to do that anyway. But if your hip area is larger or your bust area is larger, or you go ahead and measure from the shoulder to the bust point and the distance is different than it is on the dress form. So this is what the distance would be on the dress form. And if I go into verify distance between, I'm going to use straight. If I measure between the shoulder and the bust point, her measurement is going to be about 9.5, 9 3/8. And I can go around and use that same command distance between two lines and measure what her bust area is. Oh, but I didn't. Okay, I have it set over here in the commands up in the right corner to be measuring horizontal. And so when I touched this line, it automatically went with horizontal. So I'm going to switch that to vertical and measure from here to here. There we go. So you can see it changes as I move along. The widest measurement is 9 3/8, and at the waist, at the narrowest point, it looks like 8.5, and then at the hem it's 9 and slightly more than 3/8. So I can do that same thing on the whole thing and get the measurements, and you can take your measurements and compare them and come up with the measurement that you want. But you do want to make sure that the bust level is in the right place. So if you need to move this down, then you can do that. You can also make it wider. And I know some of you hate it when I tell you there are multiple ways of doing something, but there are multiple ways of doing something, and it's handy to know what they are. And if you only want to study one at a time, that's okay. But if I wanted to move the bust point, I've got this distance from the high point of shoulder to the waist. So when you're measuring yourself, you want to measure around your waist and mark where that is, and then measure the distance between the waist and the high point of shoulder and the bust point. And if your torso is longer than hers, then you're going to want to kind of cut it toward the middle and make this portion taller so that there's more space in there, and then you can move the bust point down and move the dart point down. So if I were to do that, the easiest way would be to go into advanced, fullness. You can do a lot of things with pleats, but every time the software updates, it improves a little bit. And I imagine they're going to be improving the pleat section. And I find it easier to use the fullness section and pretend to use pleats, so I avoid the pleat section unless I just want my notches moved for now. Okay, so if I want to add fullness and I want to add a straight amount between these two and make it parallel, which is usually the safest way, then I would be in advanced, fullness, parallel. Oh, and look at that. I would be changing the original. So we're going to pause for a minute and do File, Save As. And I don't want it to say all of that. I'm going to change it to say my name and add torso. And save. So now when I'm changing it, I'm not changing the original. So I'm going back to my advanced, fullness, parallel, and I'm going to cut it from pivot end to open end, but it's parallel, so on this one it doesn't really matter which, but I'm going to come straight across, and then I'm going to say okay. The location that's remaining stationary, I'm going to choose my hemline. The internal lines that are moving, I think I'm going to take these two with me. And for now the bus point. And say OK. And now I can move this as much as I want in either direction. I can shorten the torso or lengthen the torso. And since you've measured yourself and you have an exact amount, I'm going to come over here and push the button so that it says value. And the arrow in the direction I want to go is on the plus side. And over here, I'm actually at -38. So I'm going to change that to say 1. You can do 1.5 or 3, but I did 1. And now you can see where it's bigger. And through there, if you have all of your measurements correct, you can just leave that. But eventually, you would want to change this so that this straight line blends into that one, and you would end up swapping, split the underneath line and swap it so that you have a nice straight line right here. But since I'm not through messing with it, I'm not going to do that yet. You would do the same thing on the back. It would be a little bit less complicated because now, just for fun, I'm going to move the bus point down an inch. And I'm going to pretend I want it in the same place, just further down. So modify, point. I'm going to move my single point and put it here. So I've moved my bus point down to where I want it. And you can measure on you how far over, how far down. But in order to have that still look nice, I need to adjust my dart point too. So I'm also just going to stay in select point to move and choose the end point of my dart and find where that is and then just back it out on that same trajectory and set it back down. So I have now moved my bus point lower. And if you don't want to do this, go ahead and just watch the video at double time speed and see what your options are so you can come back to this video if you need to. But we'll do a simplified version when we come to our jacket. But I think it's easier to understand on the larger pieces. And I don't think if I had it to do over, I would have moved this line. I'm going to end up deleting it, but I'm going to create a 2-point line that ends that inch away and just put that back. So I have my, oh dear, cancel. So modify, delete line. So I've got those 2 lines to delete, and I'm going to modify, split my side seam right there, and say OK, and then modify, swap those 2, I want this internal line and I want to replace this curvy line and then delete that line. So my bust level is an inch lower than it was. I have an inch more torso than I had before, and I would just do that same exact thing across the back. That was advanced, fullness, parallel, because that adds an even amount as you go across. Create slash lines. I did that. Saying okay, the location remains stationary. I'm going to choose the same one as before. I'm going to just leave my internal lines. I'm going to, not that one. I want that one. And say okay. And now I can do what I want to, but I'm going to switch to value and say +1. And then I would go through the same thing and connect that and delete it. And now you can see they're going to have the same amount, they'll still match, they'll still fit. Alright, that, when they're standing up, is a horizontal circumference addition. And I'm going to go ahead and combine these two lines again. You can offset the seam so it's exactly the same. You can split it down through the shoulder area if you want to add fullness on the length of the body. So advanced, parallel. This time I'm going to come from here and come straight down. Say okay. I want this to hold still. I don't think I want to move any internal lines yet. And maybe I only want to bump that out 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to switch and say 0.25, because usually when people grow, their shoulders don't get wider. But I've added that. I would want to straighten out that line again. And then on the side seam, you can add a little bit in the armhole the same way, but that gets complicated. And usually, if you measure across here, you're not going to have much of a difference in where your armhole is in relation to the center front between sizes. But your side seam is going to come out. So that one's going to be easier to do by create line, offset even. You can do move line instead. And push that one out. We're going to be bumping them out 1/2 inch on the other one. So 0.5. Say okay. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I would have to add this in the same place down the back in my shoulder area, because I don't really want to make my neck bigger. If I want to make my neck bigger, I'm going to just move my center front and my center back. If I do one, I do the other. Maybe I'd move them out 1/8 of an inch. But if you move them out 1/8 of an inch, that's a total of 1/2 inch bigger around your neck. So maybe you'd only want to go with 1/16. So what I've done right here, if I've added 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 inch to the side seam, and I do that same thing on the other one, that's 3/4 and 1.5. So this little activity on both pieces has increased my circumference by 3 inches. So keep that math in mind when you're working on that. 1/4 of an inch plus 1/2 inch is 3/4. Doing the same thing to the other side is 1.5 inches. Double that for the circumference is a total of 3. So pick out what you want to add and divide that by 4, and then divide that by 2, and split the difference between 1/4 of it goes to the front and 1/4 of it goes to the back. If any of you are interested in more detailed videos about that and you want to send me your measurement difference, I can make a more detailed video. But that's how changing the size and position for individual shapes happens. That's not how you grade, but for a couture fit, that's how you would go about it. So I would come back to my jacket now, and if I don't want to change the size of my jacket, because I'm fitting the same person, I want to change the size of my jacket so that it fits over clothing because it's a jacket. So I didn't say anything about it when it happened, but when I adjusted this edge, the purple band disappeared that showed where the added fullness was. We just know that it's there now because the other one is still there and they're the same length. Then you would want to fix this, which will also get rid of that purple, and put in a straight line from corner to corner and swap. Modify line, swap, choose the dotted line, say OK, choose the solid line, say OK, and then delete the other line. Did I change the name of this? I didn't change the name of that, so I better not save them. I can do save as. Okay, so those are both different. And I'm going to I'm going to say piece to menu and make sure I didn't make a mess. So now I can compare it with the original, and it is 1 inch longer, and my original front is 1 inch longer and 3/8 of an inch, no, 1/4 of an inch bigger down the center front. Did I do that to the center back as well? So if I did it to the back, I need to do it to the front. So I would need to add, I would just move that line over, and I would also need to add through here and adjust the shoulder. Then another way of doing that, so you can ask me for more videos that would apply better to you, like I said, but this one, if I want to, instead of using advanced fullness add, I can do modify line anchor. Will also make a difference in the size. So modify line anchor, select the perimeter lines to move, and if I want to just lengthen the bodice, then I would choose those. I'm going to switch to value before I get started and say OK. Now those are my anchor points, and I like where those are. That's where I want Well, I guess I want this one down here, so I'm going to touch and release. I'm switching back to value. I'm going to put that down there at the end because I don't want that to change. So I'm going to switch back to value and say OK. Now it says to choose, so positive. If I wanted to lengthen the torso 2 inches, I'd type in 2, or I could shorten it. And then you can decide, so you watched it get longer, so it's 2 inches longer than the original. And here I am changing the original again, so I'm not going to save it, I'm going to delete the piece. The yellow means that they have fully updated. Up here at the top, people ask me that. It has to do with the software update. But since we're not putting anything into actual production, I'm not freaking out about it. Okay, so I want to move that point, so I'm just going to move a single point. And the new location, I can lower it 2 inches, or I could lower it 1.5 inches. I'm going to say I want to lower it 1.5 inches, so that's in the positive direction 1.5. Say OK. Well, what was that? I didn't move. Okay, well, I'll show you what I did. So over here, if I'm going to move a single point, select the point to move. I left the box checked for move both joined endpoints. I want to move that one, but do you see how I have X and Y both happening? I want to move it in the X direction. (1.5). And I have to click value to be able to enter that. So I'm going to say 1.5 in the box, and it just went wildly out here because this number was filled in. I'm going to change that one to 0 because I want it to go straight down. So I'm going to say OK, and now it's where I want it to be. And now again I can change my darts, and I want them to be about 1 inch away from the bust point. So I'm going to line this right up on one of those crosshairs so I can see where the inch away is. So I'm going to go back to modifying single point and move this so that it's aiming right at the bust point and set it down 1 inch away. And this one, I'm going to cancel because when I do that one, I want it to say move both joined endpoints at the same time. So there. Now it's acting like it should, and I'll set it down at the inch mark. So both of my darts are now aiming at the bust point, and that will work. But I am a little curious about what's happening right here. So I'm going to rotate that dart somewhere else just to see how these two are lining up now, and if they're not lining up nicely, I'll fix them. So I'm just going to temporarily rotate this line down here just to double check that. So advanced, manipulate, we're going to rotate this dart. The rotation point is the bust point, hold line is the center front. Oh, well, look at that, that's off. I wasn't careful enough about that. So learn from my mistake, and we'll talk about how to fix that. No internal lines are moving. Okay, so I'm gonna put it right back, so I'm gonna go ahead and set it down on the bust point. But this is not okay, and that happened because I moved the bust point down and changed the dart. So I need to fix my curve just right here and blend that nicely. and then split the line and swap it. Modify line, split. Sometimes things happen that I should expect, but I just don't. Oh, we're swapping. And now I'll combine those lines. It's important to combine the line. Okay, so now I can rotate that dart back up there and know that it's going to close nicely when it closes. So, advanced, manipulate. If I just choose manipulate, it's automatically the first one, which is rotate. So the dart I'm rotating is this one. Rotation point is the bus point. The hold line is the center front. And my new opening point, I'll just put it back where I think it was. No internal lines are moving, and say OK. And then I'll just set it down. So now I have, this is a nice shape, the dart's aiming in the right place, it's 2 inches longer. This dart, the bus point moved 1.5 inches. You know, you can move it whatever you need to, so measure from the shoulder. Just be consistent about whether if you measure from the high point or the midpoint, just measure in the same place both times. And then this point is in the right place. But did I make that crooked? If I set that right on top of there? I did. So it looks like it's in the right place to here, and then it curved a little bit. So, and I did it by measurement, so I was anticipating that it would go straight. So to fix that, this is what I'm going to do. Create a 2-point line. I'm going to start it from this corner, then I'm going to right click and say horizontal and pull it out this way. So I can see how far off that went when I moved it, and you don't want that to be off center. So I'm going to do that same thing that I did before. I'm just going to bump it over a little bit. So modify line anchor. This one's kind of dangerous, anchor, because of this type of thing, and I thought if I did it with value it wouldn't happen that way. So I'm going to move these 4 lines, and say OK. I'm going to leave my blend points where they are. So I say OK again. And I'm going to leave it in cursor and choose a point to guide the movement. And I want to stay right there. I just want to move this point over. So, if I want that to end up in the right place, I need a reference line. So I'm going to cancel. And I'm going to create another one just like I did this one, only I'm going to use horizontal. Create 2-point, start here, right click, vertical this time, and that gives me a place to aim. So I'm going to go back to modify line anchor. I have to zoom back out. Those are my lines. Say OK. Say OK to my anchor points, because I want to push the whole thing back over where it belongs. And say OK. And before I choose a place to guide the movement, I'm going to zoom in really tight And I can pinpoint where I'm zooming in by moving my mouse. If I come up here, it'll move in a different direction. Okay, so I'm going to choose that point and I'm going to set it down right there. And now it's where it belongs. I am a little concerned about the bump right there. Do you see how that's not a right angle? So I'm going to choose the lowest point right here and create a 2-point. I'm going to start from, that seems to be where it went off, and go with a vertical line and set it down. I guess I have to come clear out here and say OK. And in order to get everything back where it belongs now, I'm going to have to split that and swap with this one. So I can clip first, modify line clip. I want to keep this part of the line, and it automatically did that, and then I want to keep this part of the line until it touches that one. So I can now swap those. Did I split this? Don't think I did. Okay. Modify line swap. I want to swap this line and this line. Say OK for this line and this line, and say OK. Well, you know why it didn't work? I didn't choose it clockwise in an order. But I'm going to try just doing this one for this one, and that worked better. So now I'll just delete all my extras, and I have a nice right angle right here the way it belongs. It looks like it was off. I can measure it, but I'm going to guess it's closer to a 1/16. Delete. Verify, measure straight from here to here. 0.032, 0.012. Well, 1/8 is 0.125, so it's less than a 1/16 of an inch. And I fixed it, and it made me happy. It's part of chewing and balancing. And merge. Modify line combine. Those two need to be the same. Okay, so which video am I working on? Okay. Alright, so there's a variety of ways to add. You can line offset is the safest. And if you're going to add more than an inch to the side seam or an inch straight across each piece for a total of 4 inches, you really need to be starting with a different base size. But if you really want to wing it, you can. The easiest way is to just stick with the original and fit the dress form, but that's for those of you that are interested. And if you want more information, send me a picture of what you're doing with the measurements, and I will try to help.